Eventide Entertainment presents The Drive-In, hosted by Aaron Lopez. Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of The Drive-In. This week we are talking about Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Very excited to sit down and talk about this one. Saw it last night, and it has been burning in my mind since then. We are joined today by my dad, who you may have heard last time on episode 8 with Coco. Was able to come back home and see Star Wars with him, so really excited to have him come in and give some insights and some thoughts onto The Last Jedi. So, Dad, thanks for sitting in again today.
Thanks for having me.
So, some quick little background information on Last Jedi. This one's directed by Rian Johnson, and it's got all the traditional people in it. We have Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, Daisy Ridley, Adam Driver, John Boyega, and Oscar Isaac, kind of as the feature roles, but we do have plenty of others that are in there as well this time around. We wanted to start today really just by kind of getting your background information, the history of Star Wars with you. So, what were some of your memories specifically when you were dealing with the first three movies?
I would have to say that, when you look back on it, it's kind of funny looking at, the present day movies or even the prequels and things like that. Everybody's always looking for an angle. They're always looking for, what does this mean or what does that mean? But when you saw the original, you really didn't have to do that because you didn't know what to expect. There really wasn't a whole lot there other than you were going to see what everybody was talking about. Oh, this is Star Wars and things like that. And only as it's grown, as the franchise has grown, have we gotten into, it's almost, in some ways, I think, it's taken a little bit of the fun out of it.
Yeah, I can see that.
But I mean, when you think about it, you see the first one and you see it, the original raw version, where you didn't have a lot of the stuff that was added on in later years and things like that. You're just like, it was pretty cool, you know. And then when you see them in the theaters that they released those in, because they used to use those big 70mm theaters and things like that. And I saw mine at the Continental Theater in Denver, Colorado, and it was just huge, and it just blew your mind away. And then the music and everything else, that opening sequence that you get it with every Star Wars movie, just blows your mind away. But there was an innocence involved, in those first movies, and then of course the first time that you get that first big aha moment of oh my goodness, I can't believe that happened, or I can't believe he's the father, and I can't believe that Han Solo's been frozen, and and things like that. And then you also appreciate it for some of the cheesiness of it, and I think that's what made it a lot of fun. And I think that people look for certain things when you get through a series of movies, and you just it's good that those first ones were good ones just to enjoy and for what they were, and not having to worry about all the unanswered questions because you figured you were going to get them sooner or later.
Yeah, that's something. I mean, I really appreciate the first movies because of that. But now that this has become a, for lack of a better word, a universe because of all the different offshoots, whether or not it is the Clone Wars animated show or there's the new Rebels that is, we have all these different people watching and expecting them all to come together, which in a lot of times they do, but when they don't, people can't be disappointed because, yes, it is a Star Wars universe and everything kind of needs to have some continuity and become canon and whatnot, but we do take a little bit of the fun out of it because everything always has to have an answer, which we'll get to that when we talk specifically more with some of the reveals that we did have with this episode. All right, so with looking at those first three, we talked a little bit about this return. What were your thoughts specifically about episode 7, Rogue One, and now going into 8? Kind of this re-release of Star Wars, in a sense, to a new generation.
Well, and I think they've done a good job in handing it off. I mean, I know a lot of people would like to see Lucas still involved wholeheartedly with a lot of these things because he, I think I read somewhere where, Mark Hamill said that Lucas had a much different vision of these next sets of movies, but handing it off to a different generation to handle something that he started, I think is really kind of cool. And I've seen some things where they try to stay, honest to the original ideal to it, but it's good to see some of the different things that they're adding. Obviously, the big thing with the Star Wars universe is, with these first two movies, is, of course, the obvious changes in how it's presented. The technology of the day has made things so much different.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always said as we started to creep forward from the original films and we got to the third film, the technology had already changed and the dirtiness of the movie had already kind of left. And then I remember when they were bringing out the prequels, I had to laugh because I'm like, well, how are you going to present something that was dirtier than the first one, but then they present it as something completely different? And so
it had such a clean aspect, especially the images of Naboo in Episode 1 and the Gunga City. Where I remember we were watching that one as a kid, and one of the first things I remember hearing you saying is just like, whoa, especially when they go down into the lake with Gunga, because you'd never expect something like that out of 4, 5, or 6.
Right. So with this new generation of things, I think that what I've enjoyed the most is the storytelling. I think there's some good storytelling going on. I think that in Rogue One, obviously, it ties up some loose ends of what brought us to the New Hope.
Yeah.
But with the Episode 7 and 8, I think it kind of continues on. It kind of, everybody had their own ideas of what happens to everybody. The books all have their own ideas of what's happened to everybody. Things like that. So I mean, you've got a lot of things to draw on to try and draw your own conclusions to what's doing that. And I think in the end, I think that's the fun part is that everybody wants to see their theory either proved or destroyed.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what these movies are doing.
Well, that's something too that I remember, growing up, that you had the books and books of what happens after Episode 6, and those used to be canon. We used to see that those were written and those were accepted into the Star Wars universe, but they've kind of just been blown up. But it's interesting to see some of the pieces that are pulled in and those ones that are discarded and kind of just completely forgotten about. We'll talk about a couple of those actually with Episode 8.
Right.
Okay, so before we get into the summary of it, we do have to look at our trailer rundown. We had seven trailers with this one, and actually only one of them I hadn't seen. I've seen all the others, but we had The Commuter, the new Liam Neeson movie. Alpha, which is the story of a kind of like the original indigenous people and their relationship with the land, and the story of a boy and his wolf, and kind of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, so sequel there. Ready Player One, the more recent release trailer of that. Incredibles 2, which is the same teaser that we've seen. And Avengers Infinity War, which was pretty cool to see on the big screen. And then the one I'm really excited about, just because I hadn't seen it yet, was Alita Battle Angel. It was... That one, to me, just looked really interesting because of its incorporation of like sci-fi and reality with CGI, and it had Christopher Waltz in it, who usually doesn't put his name into anything that's garbage. So I will be excited to check that one out. But what were some of your thoughts on some of these trailers? Any in particular that you're excited for? I actually was very intrigued by the one with the indigenous tribes. Oh, Alpha. Yeah.
I was intrigued by that one. The other ones, Alita, I was like, God, that kind of looks like the beginning of a video game.
It feels that way.
Yeah, it really does. It feels like a beginning of a video game. So my thoughts on that one are, I'm not part of the video game generation, so it's kind of tough for me to wrap my mind around it. But the storyline sounded kind of cool. But that Alpha really intrigued me just because it looked really, I don't know, it looked visually like it was going to be a good movie, and the idea of it. And I'm sure that kind of story has been told over and over and over again, and maybe just in a different version. As for all the different sequels and things like that, I said last night to you, Jurassic Park, I said, I pretty much with Jurassic Park, I lost interest after the first one, and that was it. Never gone back, so, and that one didn't seem to really intrigue me at all. Obviously, The Incredibles we talked about the last time.
Yeah.
I think I'm ready for that. Let's just get her done. But other than that, nothing really stood out in there, that got me really, really excited about an upcoming movie. Liam Neeson's gig, I mean, come on, man. How many times are you going to do that over and over?
Same thing. Yeah.
That's just garbage, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it was, for me, I think, that's the only reason why Alita stood out to me so much, is just because it's the only one I haven't seen. Realizing that the excitement of trailers is kind of lessening because of these releases online, and people see them long before the intention. So whenever something new does come out, it's always kind of exciting.
Yeah, I mean, they're releasing them on the halftime of football games now.
Yeah, you know,
Come on, dude.
and they're even telling you beforehand that they're going to release. So
yeah.
There's not the excitement.
They're
as
using
much
it to
as
draw
used
to other things other than the movies.
Yeah,
you know, so that's kind of irritating.
And it was cool to see Avengers: Infinity War on a huge IMAX screen. The theater we went to had the IMAX screen for it. It was really, really cool just to see it on large scale. I'm very excited for that one. I've decided that I know it's going to take a lot of willpower on my end because it's not coming out until May next year, but I'm not going to see any more trailers because I don't need to be convinced any further to go see that one.
Right.
That's
an easy call right there. I mean, whether you're part of the Marvel comic folks or not, I mean, that just looks like it's going to be intense, and it has the feel of an epic coming at you. So I think it'll be kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm excited. All right, so our spoiler-free summary. This one's nice, short, and sweet. It's going to be difficult to talk about. It's going to be difficult to talk about any of this without getting heavily into spoilers. So your spoiler-free summary is that Rey develops her newly discovered abilities with the guidance of Luke Skywalker, who is unsettled by the strength of her powers. Meanwhile, the Resistance prepares to do battle with the First Order. So, of course, very short and sweet. Not a whole lot to go off of with that one. If you are tuning into this, chances are you have already seen Star Wars Last Jedi and are ready for us to dive in. If you haven't, though, what the hell are you waiting for? Go out and see it right now and see it again and again. You're going to love this one. Go out and see the movie and then come back to us when you are all caught up. All right, now we are free to discuss spoilers all over the place. I'm really excited to get into this. We are on our way back from the movie last night. There's like a hesitation not to talk too much about it because we didn't want to give up too much of what is going to be discussed today. So we really haven't talked a whole lot about anything specific. So I'm really excited. All right, so as always, it starts out with the crawl, the episode 8 description. I'm actually kind of surprised that no one cheered when it started. You could tell a couple people wanted to.
There was a couple people to the left of us that kind of tried to, but everybody else was just like, "Come on, dude, we've been waiting. Let's get rolling."
I'm sure the Thursday night first couple premieres of it, people were losing their minds.
Yeah, all the people that showed up dressed up and all that kind of stuff. And
yeah, so it was cool. It's kind of set our plot tone. Nothing really in this one that we didn't already know, except for that it really kind of pushed this idea that Snoke had taken over and he wasn't as much hidden in the background anymore. He was very well known as his intentions and who he was. So that was the only thing that I got out of the crawl that I didn't already know.
It was a pretty simple crawl.
It was. It was a simple one this time. Crawl. But as always, we start out in space with the Rebellion evacuating their base. It had been discovered where their rebel base was, and so they were evacuating before the First Order showed up to take them out. Something that I loved seeing early and often in this, and she wasn't a focal point by any means, but much larger in this one than she was in Force Awakens, was Billie Lourd. Had a much bigger presence, Carrie Fisher's daughter, who was basically just an unnamed character as far as just, she wasn't necessarily like an ensemble character. She didn't have a name. She wasn't part of the plot, but she wasn't just a 2-second cameo like she was in Force Awakens. And I thought it was really cool that they got her more incorporated with this one, especially with how she has been more and more in the forefront with being in a lot of Ryan Murphy's work with, what's it called? Scream Queens and American Horror Story. So it's cool to see her get a little bit more screen time. And, she joins a lot of other plot points, which is just real neat to see. But regardless of that, though, we see that the rebellion is trying to get out. They're trying to escape. And they're really, this storyline doesn't start to take shape until Poe, Cameron, shows up, and he is trying to basically distract and waste time for the transport to get everybody on board and then get out of there. I think this one, more than any other, and maybe it's just because I haven't seen the other ones lately, but I really felt that Last Jedi played up humor more than I have seen recently.
Oh, yeah.
At least perhaps until the 4, 5, and 6, and not even 6 didn't have a whole lot of humor. Really, more 4 and 5. What were your initial thoughts with this element of humor? Almost like he's waiting on hold, waiting for the real guy to come up, and when he knows he's clearly playing with, he's just messing around with him. What did you think about the humor element?
Well, I thought it was really good because you tend to think about the New Order, or you can go all the way back to the Imperial and all that stuff. There was such a seriousness about them, but and then the Rebellion always had this sense of humor. They, whether it was good, bad, or ugly, they would ever do that. And I think to bring that, to put somebody out, and I get this feeling about the First Order is, and I've seen this with these first 2 movies using the First Order. They try to present themselves as very organized, very disciplined soldiers.
Yeah.
But the slightest thing seems to take them off their game, and it seems like the Rebellion senses that.
Yeah.
So by doing something as simple as playing an old phone joke that, kids have done for years, hello? What? That kind of stuff, it threw them off their game, and before they know it, they're all distracted, and it's like, and then it's game on.
Yeah. Well, I think it speaks to this idea, and we see it a lot in this episode, but definitely in the last, with this idea where the First Order and this new empire really looks like it is an office, like kind of one of these cubicle style offices where everybody has this kind of odd, morbid sense of humor, but they can't display it because the higher ups will get mad at them.
Right.
But it seeps out every now and then.
Yeah.
And
like in the first one, The Force Awakens, where he's having his temper tantrum.
Exactly.
They come around the corner and then they just turn around and like, oh no, hell no, we're out of here. But yeah, I mean, it's like you've got a bunch of, let's just put it as much of tight asses running the show.
Exactly.
And nobody wants to be controlled. They want to just kind of do their own thing. They'll do their job, but let us goof around a little bit.
Yeah. No, I thought it was really cool. And we'll talk about a lot of the humor as we go along. But essentially, Poe's plan works out, and it gets everybody off of the planet, off the base. And Leia says, all right, let's go. And she's ready to roll. But Poe doesn't want to. He wants to finish the job, which essentially is to take out this dreadnought, which is there. Which is I really, really liked this introduction because something that I had been missing from the original 3 to now was this feeling of the space as this the sea battle,
right?
Which it used to be kind of playing off of that, with,
right?
With your Star Destroyers. Being like these huge ships and like for the sea, and all of like the TIE fighters and the X-Wings and things like that being the battles that would happen in the air above it.
Right.
And we weren't getting much of that. And so when we finally got the Dreadnought, for me, I was excited because it really felt like one of these huge like juggernaut style ships.
Well, it takes you back to Episode 6.
Yeah.
Where you see that first Imperial Star Cruiser for the first time, and you're like, damn.
Yeah.
And then this thing shows up last night, and that was the first thing that came to my head. I'm like, damn.
Yeah, it was huge, and it was just so cool to see. Visually, it was a really cool start. But then they bring in the idea that he was like, all right, well, we're here to finish it. We're gonna have a chance to take down a dreadnought. We're going to do it, and that's where you see the bombers come out of nowhere, and all of Poe's fleet comes together, and they go to try to destroy the dreadnought. Unfortunately, things turn to shit very quickly.
Oh god!
And they're left with one bomber left, and not many X-wings either. Which this brings into one of our kind of side storylines with the pilot of the last bomber ends up being the sister of one of the main characters, or the new characters that we see later in the movie, Rose. And I was very confused. I didn't leave the movie confused about this, but at the very beginning, I was confused as to what her necklace meant. I was feeling like it might be a tie to some of the different, I don't want to call them Jedi, but the followers of the Jedi that we saw in Rogue One. I thought that was a connection. It wasn't. We find out that it's just two sides. They're sisters, and these two, like the yin and yang symbols, were on these necklaces. But I felt like it was cool. This idea of the sacrifice that this last bomber. I don't know if we ever got a name out of this second sister. But but this sacrifice that we saw in Rogue One, we don't really get that all that often. So when you see it, it's cool because it shows the reality of what this war is, and it's that people are going to die, and they are going to die to take out, a dreadnought and sacrifice themselves for the greater cause. But this idea of greater cause comes out later on. We'll talk about with who is the good guy in war. So we'll get to that a little bit more. So what was your before they jump into Lightspeed and this small battle, but the opening battle scene with this dreadnought? What were your opinions on it as what Star Wars usually does, which is gives us a big space battle or something big at the beginning of a movie?
Well, I think that having the dreadnought show up, I think was just incredibly impressive. But then you see what the rebellion for what it was when you go back to the original series is a bunch of ragtags. Their equipment looks ragtag.
Yeah.
With the exception of, that bomber was kind of a neat idea.
The bomber was different.
But it kind of goes back to that. You think, oh well, they would have had a really cool looking ship to do something like that. But in reality, it was not much different than what you would see, like the bombings in World War II.
Yeah, very reminiscent.
Very reminiscent of that slow, plotting and things like that. So there's a kind of a throwback element to their bombing campaign. But then once, of course, everything starts to hit, and again, the rebellion flying by the seat of their pants. It always takes one to kind of do that stuff. And they use it for character development because then we learn more about Poe, and what kind of a leader or quote unquote leader he is as we go through
the Flyboy. They call him.
He ends up being called Flyboy later. People like him, but he's reckless, and so it's kind of tough. But I think that opening scene with the bombers and things like that, very reminiscent of old war movies. Kind of the whole thing about here's the big slick enemy on the block, and here we are. We're going to try and take him out with our simple equipment, and we fly by the seat of our pants, and somehow we still get it.
Yeah, and that's what I really liked about this movie, especially is it continued to really impress me along the lines of what the original three did, which is tell the story of World War II and the Nazis, and you really got that feeling again when you saw this idea of the dreadnought and the bombers, and it felt very reminiscent of World War II. And of course, as always, all of the First Order or the Empire or whatever they're called, very there's a lot of comparisons that can be made to the Hitler and Nazis and the stormtroopers of and the stormtroopers of of Star Wars. So I thought that was really cool. So they do jump out, and this is where we first see Snoke and Kylo, and Snoke is chewing out Kylo that, hey, you let them escape, and look at what you did with the hesitation that you showed continues to ruin you, and you are not the person I thought you were, which pisses Kylo off, and he has another one of his tantrums. But this leads us into when they do jump out of Lightspeed, we find that there's some sort of a tracking device, which I don't know if I was just missing this. They talked about it often. They kept coming back to it, but I never felt that they completely explained what this tracking device was doing, other than it was on this one ship and it could track in within a certain amount of ships. I don't know. It was a little. That was one of the only confusing things for me.
It's done in passing.
Yeah.
It really is done in passing when you got Finn meeting the newer character. I can't think of her name.
Rose.
Yeah, Rose. She kind of gives you kind of an idea of it, but it doesn't really fully explain it.
Yeah.
And maybe in the last installment we might get an explanation of how they do that, but who knows? Because we'll get to the end of that, but obviously it's still going to be a factor.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that you don't need to completely understand it in order to believe it. It just was a small hole that I noticed that I was like, well, they're talking about it, and when in that first interaction between Finn and Rose, they clearly understand this tracking device and what they need to do, but it's done. There's no layman's terms in any way, shape, or form placed out there.
They may as well just said it was like find my iPhone.
Yeah, it was really weird, and I don't know, but yeah, they eventually they do explain it enough that you understand what needs to be done, but the whole concept, talking about we've got the rebellion on an end of a string. You're not supposed to be able to track through Lightspeed. But they are able to. They are able to, which is kind of one of the 3 or 4 main plots. It's important to know that because that is the First Order on the tails of the rebellion that whole time. Mm-hmm. So they jump out, and then all of a sudden they think they're okay, but the First Order's ships are right behind them. So this is where we see Kylo, who is pissed off, who goes out and he's like, "All right, well, you don't think I'm good enough? Watch." Mm-hmm. So he gets his ships. He gets his ship as well as his kind of escort TIE fighters, and they go out and they're gonna go blow some shit up. This is where I thought we were gonna lose Leia, and I thought that
based on the trailers, that's kind of what you thought.
Exactly.
You know,
which I guess I should have been a little smarter to know the trailer wouldn't give that up. But at the same time, hearing all these things about how they did not have to change anything in the movie after she passed, made me think, oh, well, they wrote her out early and they lucked out. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't the case. We didn't lose Leia at all in this movie, in fact, which is one of the questions we'll talk about at the end of what they're going to do next. But Kylo has this hesitation as he's going to attack the bridge, which is one of the themes and the threads of the movie. Is he able to turn to the light or not? His escort TIE fighters do the job though, and they destroy the bridge, which unfortunately, and this it's an afterthought, but they do mention that we lose Admiral Akbar, so he's finally dead. Unfortunately, no more traps from him, which I was hoping for one more.
I know. I was
hoping for one more.
So waiting for one of those.
It was like he's there and now he's dead, and they didn't give him one more. It's a trap, but it's okay. So we lose Akbar. We supposedly lose Leia, and I think that I bought it. I bought it like hook, line, and sinker. I was like, okay, well she's dead too. We see her floating in space, and we're like, oh well, clearly she's dead now.
Well, see, and that was where when they go back to her floating in space, that's when I knew she was coming back.
Yeah,
you know, because I'm like, if she's dead, she's dead.
Yeah,
you know, why do we go back? I mean, they didn't go back to find the body of Han Solo, and
exactly.
they didn't go back to do any of that. But they go back to her, and I'm like, oh well, here we go. You know, so she's sticking around.
And you know, I thought that was kind of interesting when we do see her using the Force. So she's floating in space, her hand starts to twitch, her eyes open, and then she uses the Force to go back to the ship and get back on, and then she falls into a coma because of the stress it put on her. Mm-hmm. But I think that I'm really worried as to what they're going to do with that. I really feel that through the edits, they probably pulled back on Leia's Force after that, because how are they going? They haven't filmed anything with Episode 9,
right?
And they're going to have to figure out a way to write her out, because I had heard rumors, and this was right after she'd passed, that they were not going to CGI her like they did Tarkin in Rogue One.
Yeah, and I get the feeling that they're going to have to tie her more into the Force, without giving the rest of the movie away at this moment. But they have to tie her into the Force and have her deal with something in the Force that the how she is going to function. Think about it. I mean, a lot of the characters that you see back have all died, and things like that. So there's ways that you can do that. I mean, I think that they'll have to tie her into the whole Jedi thing.
They have to. Yeah,
they're going to have to tie her.
The way this movie ended, they can't. This is one loose end that they have to figure out, and they have to do it because it's Carrie freaking Fisher.
Yeah,
they have to do it well.
Yeah.
So
nobody's going to accept. Nobody's going to accept a crap version of that. Mm-hmm. The Star Wars fanatics of the world are just not going to stand for one. Even if they were thinking about doing a CGI character of her, I don't think it works.
No, and I think that it barely worked for when she showed up as the young Leia at the end of Rogue One.
Barely.
It was cool. It was cool to see her, but I couldn't have a movie of that.
No, God, no.
The way they did it with Tarkin, he's such an older character anyway, so it worked out for that, and he was always seen in the darkest of settings,
right?
So you didn't see all the features, but Leia's not, and she's one of those characters that if they don't do justice to it, it could ruin the ninth.
Right.
So I'm really hoping that they figure out something there. Mm-hmm. So we now know again that Leia's got the Force, which again we talk about the old canon, which made sense because she went on and learned from Luke after Episode 6. So to know that she also, as a Skywalker, has some elements of the Force, we finally see that. We had never seen that other than just her intuition and her feelings, knowing, being one with the Force, and that. So that was really cool to see. But she does go into a coma. We get Holdo, Lieutenant Admiral, I think, or something Admiral Holdo, who is. It's a confusing character, and I think they did a really good job with her. Is that you hate her and really appreciate and almost love her as a character by the end of the movie. You go through a whole range of, like, I hate her, and what's she doing? And she's destroying everything. Oh, she's saving everything. You just go through all the entire range. But Poe does not like this. Poe goes and basically tells her, what's going on? And she's like, well, you got demoted, I believe, and you don't get to know what's going on.
Right.
And he hates this. He needs to know. And so you start to see the elements of his mutiny that he stages later on playing through. We also, though, in this, we see Finn, who wakes up, and I don't remember. Why was Finn in this coma? Or what was going on with him at the end of Force Awakens? I didn't remember him
Kylo ran a lightsaber up his spine.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. I should have remembered that.
Yeah. Ran, that kind of puts you down for a little bit.
Well, and was this the new Bacta tank? You think what he was wearing?
Yeah.
Which was kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, and that was kind of some of the comedy of it, too, is that he's just running around, that damn thing squirting all over the place. But I think that was pretty funny. But yeah, I think that the tank is, it's the same thing as what they ran Luke through.
Yeah, and I thought that was cool. It's continuing to call upon the old mythology and the old stories, but also
with new technology.
With the new technology, with this new, because we are years in the future. So Finn's there, and Finn actually discovers that he needs to get off because he believes that if Rey comes back to where she is. She has this little, I guess, homing beacon that she has. And
Find my iPhone.
Yep, again. And, yeah. She has a homing beacon, Rey does, and Leia does, and that's how she's going to figure out where to go back. And he's like, I have to get that off because if she comes back to this, the First Order's right behind us. She'll be in danger. So he goes to leave, and that's where we get introduced to Rose, who is the sister of the bomber who sacrificed herself at the beginning of the movie. And Rose is not the charismatic character that her sister was, or at least the courageous one. She works behind the pipes. She's basically an engineer, somebody who is just upkeep, maintenance. And she figures that Finn is trying to escape through the escape pod, talking about how her sister just sacrificed herself, so that brings her loyalty to the cause even stronger. And so she stuns Finn, and we get another humorous element where Finn's basically, he wakes up later on and the only thing he can feel is his mouth. He can only talk. But we figure out that they have to destroy this tracking beacon. Otherwise they're doomed. So there's another shift away. In this, I'm starting to get to this point where it was not hard within the movie, but when talking about it is very difficult to keep all these storylines intact.
Right.
We haven't even gotten to Rey and Luke,
right?
And there are so many different things going on that they did a phenomenal job piecing it together and splicing it in a way that you didn't forget something was happening,
right?
And I thought that was really well done,
right?
But it's difficult to go to, which realistically, I'm looking at it, and we need to kind of look at Rey now. So before we get to her, is there anything that we missed in that first section with the rebellion that you wanted to talk about?
No, I think that's it. I think we got it covered. I think that we just kind of get that opening, start, a number of different tentacles leading out to where they're going to, make the crux of the film. So I think we got out what we needed to get out.
Okay. So now we look at where The Force Awakens left off. And quite literally, we're on Ahch-To, and we see Rey walking up the side of the hill, hands out the lightsaber, and one of the funnier moments again, Luke picks it up, and we get this contemplation that he had at the very end of Force Awakens, and then he throws it off the cliff. Well, he throws it behind him, and it's just kind of one of those, like, huge payoffs that you see Rian Johnson just kind of screwing with the audience, that he expects this huge aha moment, and he's like, no, there's a reason why I'm on this island. I don't want this lightsaber. I don't want any of this. Go away.
Yeah, I mean, he spends about 10, 15 minutes just making him look like a crotchety old man.
Yeah.
So,
within those first elements, one of the things that were a huge part of the marketing and building up to this were the porgs.
Right.
Which these little, basically the seagulls, or the new Ewoks, or however you want to look at them. These porgs are all over Ahch-To, and they also end up, a couple of them, or one of them in particular, ends up leaving with Chewbacca and being later in the movie. What were your thoughts on the porgs as where they were? Do you think that they were utilized too much, just right? Your initial reactions to them?
I think they were used just fine. I mean, they kind of offer the cute option, but I mean it harkens back to Trouble with Tribbles in Star Trek.
Yeah.
You throw something in there, everybody's like, oh, how cute, and then it's fine. I mean, as long as they don't really have a speaking part per se. So they're not making any decisions. They're not taking over the controls. They're just kind of there.
Yeah.
And that's fine. It doesn't bother me. I think it's watching Chewbacca trying to eat them early on.
That was one of the funniest parts.
That was one of the funnier scenes. I'm just like, and it kind of humanized Chewbacca a little bit, and the fact that, he does have a heart, but we'll also talk about him later, because I was very impressed with some of the things that happened with him later, even though he's still one of the, few remaining to the old franchise, that there's some things still going on with that guy that I'm really impressed with. And but the porgs, they are what they are. They're part of the scenery. The same will go with some of the other island inhabitants as we'll get through this.
Yeah,
but, just some they're kind of like comedy sidelight.
Well, I mean, let's talk about those. So we had the other island inhabitants, which were there for comedy, and then we also, when we get later on to this final planet of Crate, we have the crystal critters, as Finn called them, which basically are like these ice crystal foxes or dogs. We had a lot of this, and we didn't get much of this other than specific characters like Maz in Force Awakens and all of the people that were with her. But unless I'm forgetting anybody, this is the first time that we've really had the creatures and just natural inhabitants of areas kind of get a little bit more screen time again.
Yeah, well, I mean, They take on the form of the Ewoks when they show up on Endor and things like that. I mean, they're the inhabitants, but they have purpose.
Yeah.
The porg's purpose, I think, were just there.
Yeah, they were just there. They were a sense of probably a food for Luke.
Yeah.
Other than the fish that we see him, which I thought that was a cool moment.
Yeah.
Fishing with this 100-foot pole off the side of a cliff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. The porgs were cool. I don't know if they were utilized too much. I think that the way in which they used them, the Chewbacca scene was one that really was funny. Seeing him eating, basically cooking one and getting ready to eat it,
attempting to eat one,
and then the 5 or 6 of them are like, "Are you really just going to eat somebody?" And he chews them away, and then he turns and looks at the other one, and the other one's about to cry.
Yeah,
you see this human element of the porg where its eyes are tear filled and its mouth is in just utter despair and fear, and he can't eat the porg. I don't think he ever throws it away, but we never see him eat it.
Yeah, he was
which is
getting
really
ready
funny.
to, but you don't ever really see it.
So the reason why we're on Ahch-To are not the porgs. It's because Luke's there and Rey is there, trying to coerce him to come back. But at the same time, she's trying to get answers. She wants to know who she is, what her role in this Force is, and what the Force is, and in all these Jedi secrets and teachings. And she expects Luke to be the one to give them to her, and he has nothing. He wants nothing to do with it. There weren't many moments in Force Awakens, or sorry, not in Force Awakens. Force Awakens, actually, there were many of these moments. In Last Jedi, there were not many moments that mirrored Empire, as far as I was concerned.
No.
This was one that did, though. You have a teacher who doesn't want to teach, which was Yoda not really wanting to teach Luke. Didn't feel like it was all that important. You don't understand. This is not what is important. And just he wants to live his quiet life on Dagobah, whereas Luke wants to live his quiet life on Ahch-To. What were your thoughts as far as this mirror of Yoda and Luke, and now with Luke and Rey?
Well, I see Luke for what he was when he was a young Jedi, or before he even became a Jedi. Before, I mean, his thought process, as much as everybody wants him to be the Master Jedi, that everybody has their ideas of what it means to be a Master Jedi, and I think the appearance of Yoda later kind of settles some of that. Mm-hmm. But Luke is Luke, and I still get that feeling that he never really is on board with everything he wants to. He's trying to be something that everybody thinks he is in some ways.
This legend that he talks about later.
Yeah, he talks about it later, and I was very happy about that scene, because that was kind of even when you finish the first trilogy, you're never really convinced that Luke is going to be the powerful person that you've seen with even going back to the prequels and things like that they feed into. He's not powerful. He's never seen as powerful.
I think the closest you get is in Jabba's palace.
Yeah,
I mean that's where he shows off his ability.
But again, it comes down to moving rocks and trying to get into somebody's head. He never really talks about you never see Luke, and that's the mystery coming into this entire series, is what has he become? Mm-hmm. And what we're presented with is a crotchety old man who could care less.
Yeah.
I mean, he as we find out later, he doesn't care about the legend. He doesn't care about anything. He doesn't even care about the Force. Not even practicing.
Yeah, he's pretty much given it up. We find, as Rey goes and she looks at her connection to the Force in the first lesson, which we'll talk about here, is that she did not see him. He's like, you do not have your connection with the Force. You've lost it.
Right. He's become his uncle.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's become his uncle. He's just, he does not care.
Which reminds me, it was not the same type of milk, but even you're completely right when you say he's become his uncle, because it's bantha milk basically, but if they're not banthas, they're just these. Which that was a very funny but awkward moment where he basically walks up to this animal who's sitting here, and it's not. It looks more like a sentient creature rather than an animal, and he milks it and drinks the milk. And he's got milk all over his beard, and then the animal looks over at Rey like, what? Which I don't even know how to explain it. It was very
uncomfortable.
Yeah, there were a couple of those moments where you're like, wait,
very uncomfortable. And it's like, the animal's looking at Rey like, well, he's ours.
Yeah, and that's the thing is all of these things, they're uncomfortable. But they happen because it's the reality of the situation.
Right.
He can't drink the seawater. It's this is him surviving.
Right.
So
and for how old is he supposed to be? It looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And as we find out, he can. I mean, getting up on that pole he uses to do the fishing. I mean, he's obviously still fairly nimble.
Yeah.
For that kind of a thing. But again, I think that it's the Force within Luke that is I think they were pretty honest to that. I mean, he was, again, we've never seen him be the powerful Jedi like you've seen like with Darth Vader and how they do these things, or now you see with Kylo Ren or things like that. I mean, it's all been kind of, like you said, legend. We really have never really seen what he became afterwards.
Yeah, and that speaks a lot to this idea of kind of, and I think just Mark Hamill himself, we were having a conversation that before we even went to the movie, and how he himself has become synonymous with two characters, the Joker, who he voices, and then Luke. And he is living off of a 5 to 6 year span, or however 8 years, however those long the first three came out. He's living his entire life off of those one moments, and that's exactly what Luke is doing. Luke is living off of blowing up the Death Star, and basically 3 or 4 large moments that happened in his life that he like Rey, that we'll talk about later, really was never supposed to be part of.
Right.
That was not his story. And so him continuing on this as being this legend, you're right. He's not necessarily always the person that everybody sees him to be, which I think is really important because of his continued declines to Rey. He's not going to teach her. And in this, I do want to talk about this as we are on Act 2. There's a development that happens, which I thought was done just visually and cinematically was done extremely well. Was the connections, the mind melding connections with Kylo and Rey, which I thought was really cool to see how they were always, except for the one moment, they were in two different places, but they were in the same place.
Yeah.
And that was just, it was the angles and the camera cut, the editing and the cinematic elements of it were just so cool.
And it also was a good thing to show you that how disconnected Luke was. For him to not know these things were going on. Now think about it. Palpatine seemed to know what everybody was doing.
Always.
All right? And here you got Luke, who's supposed to be the second coming of whatever, of Yoda or whoever, but it shows you how disconnected from the Force he really was going into this. That, again, he is not what everybody thinks he would have been. I think everybody was expecting him to be the all-powerful and all that stuff, and he's just a simple farmer is what he is.
Yeah. Well, and I thought it was cool because, it felt like this was just all in their minds. They could hear each other and there's the connection, and then that's what really strengthens the idea that they could be siblings or related, is because, you always saw Leia and Luke knowing something was wrong when something was going on with the other, so they had that connection. But really, it's cool because you see that they're in different spots, but then there's the one where it's raining, and after they separate, Kylo wipes his face and he's got water on his face.
Right.
And we see that they may have actually been a lot closer than what we would have thought.
Right.
But it ultimately comes down to a third time that this happens. But before we get to that third one, I want to talk about the lessons. R2 basically makes a 2-minute cameo to convince Luke to help out.
Right.
And he plays the "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi" message, which even Luke says that's low. Like that's a dirty trick that you're doing that to get me pulled in. But it works.
Yeah. Well, and I think it suggests that is a trick that Obi-Wan would have used.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that's a trick of they all were, when they were training Luke, they were all trying to convince him that this is the path and this is how you get there. But Luke always had his own way, and again, he has to, they resort to a dirty trick to kind of get his mind where it needs to be.
And it shows that he can't forget about who he truly is, which he has other people out there that he still cares about. Leia being one of them,
right.
And his sister and his family essentially, and this idea of Ben being a failure and him not wanting to go back because he knows what he did to Han and Leia by failing them and by failing Ben, which we'll talk about here shortly, about this idea that we don't really ever know until we know what happened between Kylo and Luke. We get 3 different versions of it, and finally the third version really kind of ties the first 2 together. We get the one where basically Luke went to go talk to Ben, and he he pulled the house on him and left and had destroyed his temple.
Right.
And then we get the Kylo version of it, which basically is Luke got really upset and didn't see, or just basically thought that that Ben was going to be evil and went to go kill him. And it was more self-defense than anything, which ultimately it turns out to be a little bit of both. Kylo was too far gone. Snoke had reached him and turned him, and Luke went to go kill him but hesitated and didn't realize. He realized at that moment what he was just about to do, and he couldn't do it. At that point, though, Kylo had seen it, and
which in itself becomes the theme of the entire movie.
Yeah.
And the fact that they've all kind of dabbled on both sides of the Force. The first time Luke goes into the tree, and he, you see some of the parallels of their work with the Force.
Yeah.
And it shows kind of the hit and miss of it. You either take one side or the other, but there's always that middle ground. And, Luke was always kind of a middle ground kind of a guy. He was always thinking either too far ahead, or he was trying to stay in the moment and just wanted to be left alone. You're seeing them all kind of in that beginning stages, even though Kylo's probably been with it much longer than Rey. Obviously.
Well, and even Rey has her moment in that first lesson where she jumps right to the dark side.
Yeah, jumps right on in and things like that. So I think that you see that being played out quite a bit through the movie, which I thought was kind of neat to see, in the fact that the Force isn't always just one of those things that's so clean cut. You either get it this way or you get it that way. That there is actually some gray area,
which is one of the things that I was dead set we were going to get the gray order, and we didn't. We didn't get that, but I'm holding out hope that we will end up there, because the gray order basically is this idea that both good and bad are existing at the same time. You can't just have the always patient, always honorable, holier than thou way that the Jedi usually try to portray, but you don't always have to go with the angry, emotional way that the Sith do. And whether or not they called it that, that's really where Luke ends up. It's kind of where Rey ends up, and it's where Kylo spends the majority of the movie, in this middle area.
Yeah.
So I'm still holding out that they'll call it what it is, and we'll maybe get some gray order in the third. But I don't know. I was dead set that it was going to happen verbatim in this movie, and we didn't completely get that.
Right.
So let's talk real quick. We're getting close to our halfway mark, so let's talk about the Luke's lessons. As far as I'm concerned, I only saw 2. Did we see the third lesson? Because the first one was about what the Force is. The second one was about the Jedi basically being victims of their own hubris. And then I don't remember a third. Was there a third, and I just don't remember?
I just don't. Now that you mention it, I'm not real sure what the third was, other than quite possibly, the end of the movie, and what happens.
Yeah,
it may have been the third lesson, and quite honestly, I think that the appearance of Yoda is what brings that third lesson about.
Oh, absolutely. And it's really cool because I don't remember specifically how many lessons that Yoda taught, but it did. Like we said before, it doesn't mirror in many ways, but this whole idea of teaching the ways of the Force, Rey comes in with the same expectations that Luke did. Luke wants to be taught to do things, and he doesn't realize that you already have it,
right?
And it just needs to be
refined,
and formed, and shaped. But it's really interesting to see this mirroring. Again, we get more humor. We have Rey actually trying to feel the Force, and Luke smacking her with a stick, and
yeah, that was some good stuff right there. That was actually pretty funny, and his facial expressions. Of course, you expect this from Mark Hamill, in general, but his facial expressions just priceless.
Well, and to me, that was probably the best humor that we got from Luke in the entire movie. Where he says reach out, and she physically puts her hand out, and he's like, "Are you kidding me?" And he's holding the stick, and he's screwing with her, and he's playing. Do you feel it? You feel it? Oh, that's it. Oh, the Force must be really strong with you if you can feel it. Then he smacks her, and she's like, "What? Oh, he didn't mean literally." Which is funny because the Jedi are not very literal in any sense of the word. And the second was interesting because that incorporates this idea of the epic more than anywhere else, with the Jedi being the heroes that are victims of their own hubris.
Right, exactly.
They are people who are basically destined to fail because of the way they do things. They are the ones who brought about the Sith by being so strong.
Right.
And he said, even at your highest moments, the Jedi's strength, when they were the strongest that they had ever been, that's when they failed.
Right.
That's when they themselves fell down and became no more. So he's like, the Jedi are not these perfect people. They are failures, and I am a failure, and that's where we see his battles and struggles with what he has failed to do with Kylo Ren.
Right.
Okay, so we have a little bit more. We have Rey getting really angry with this little tiff that she has, finding out kind of the reality of what happened that night between Kylo and Luke. But then we have a little mini fight between Rey and Luke, which was really cool. Really cool.
That was really cool.
We see Luke, using this weather vane basically to fight back against Rey's staff, and it was really cool. It was basically the fight between Vader and Luke that we get in the third movie in Jedi, but it was without the lightsabers, which was just a neat little callback.
Right.
And then Luke basically, Rey says that she's not leaving without him, and he's saying, "I'm not gonna leave." So we basically see that Rey is gonna leave without Luke, she's going to go on and try to turn Kylo to the light. So, but that wraps up that little storyline. Well, not little, very large actually, with Rey and Luke in Act 2. So this is a perfect time before we shift back over to the rebellion and their story, and as things are starting to shift back over to Snoke and Kylo. It's a good time for us to take a short little break. So you know what time it is. It's time to go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby, grab some snacks, refill your popcorns, go to the bathroom, and let's see what's coming out soon from Eventide. We'll see you soon.
You know, there's nothing quite as satisfying as a good conversation with intelligent company. Join comedian Don Smith every week as he sits down and talks with comedians, actors, filmmakers, writers, and everyday schmoes. It's The Life with Don Smith, Wednesdays at noon on 106.9 FM, and now available on the Eventide Entertainment podcast feed every Friday on Spreaker, YouTube, and iTunes. The weekdays are made for working, but the weekends, those are made for gaming. Join Ellison Smith every Saturday for a new episode of Saltwater Gaming as he breaks down video games of all different genres, consoles, platforms, and eras. Get a bit of the old and a bit of the new, a bit of the action and a bit of the mystery. Get it all every Saturday on Saltwater Gaming, brought to you by Eventide Entertainment.
We are back. Just got done talking about Rey and Luke and their interactions on Act 2 before Rey decides to leave and go back to try to get to Kylo and see if that is maybe where the answers lie. We kind of have a split storyline here, so we're going to take it in two different ways. We have Finn and Rose who decide, hey, they're going to have to go find this master. What did they call him? The Codebreaker.
The Codebreaker, Master Codebreaker.
And they're going to have to go to Canto Bight, which is basically a Las Vegas version, Star Wars Vegas. And we have a very small little cameo by Maz from Force Awakens.
I hoped we were going to talk about that.
And something is going on with Maz.
Did that not just strike you as, who in the hell is she fighting?
That is where I really see us going in Episode 9.
Yeah.
Because there's more going on in this world that they can't ignore.
Right.
Maz is not... She's somebody who actually, before we find her on Force Awakens, is quite peaceful. She's found a place where she is able to just be, and like all of these older characters, they have had this storied past, but they're ready to let that
Well, and it goes back
on.
to Force Awakens, where she says that's a story for another time.
Yeah.
You know, there's more to her character than we've been told.
And I hope that's where we go.
I hope they develop that part of it.
So she says you got to.
And obviously she's some sort of badass warrior.
Oh, she is. She's Yoda.
Yeah.
She basically is our new Yoda, where she's very calm and quiet, but can kick some ass when needed.
Don't mess with me, or I will mess you up.
But Maz says, all right, you got to head to Canto Bight, and you need to find this guy, and you'll find him with this lapel.
Now, my understanding was they went to her to be the Codebreaker. Was that my understanding?
They thought she was going to be the answer. Yeah.
Right, okay.
And
I wasn't sure if she was actual Codebreaker, or they're going to her for the actual information to find a Codebreaker.
I thought they went to her because they knew she'd have the answers. Okay. And whether or not that would be, she would be the one to get them onto Snoke's ship, or she could lead them.
Right.
But she does tell them to head over to this new planet, and you need to find this guy who has this lapel.
Right.
It's like a flower lapel
button.
And they do. They go, Rose, BB-8, and Finn all head to Canto Bight, which is kind of a cool setting. It's really where my favorite theme of the movie is developed, with this idea that war is a time where it's about life and death, and war is really this idea that there is going to be somebody who is going to benefit from war.
Right.
It's this idea that you really see this wealth, the reality that someone is going to profit at the expense of someone else, and Canto Bight is full of those people. And Rose knows it, and she calls it out for what it is. But we see this a lot of we've got people who are kind of oblivious that there is this huge war going on. They're playing games. They're enjoying themselves. They're drinking fancy drinks.
And again, this is where Star Wars gives you life lessons.
Exactly.
And uses the present, or even the past of the country as part of a backdrop to what's going on.
Yeah. And it was neat to see this story start to take shape. So they go to this casino, and this is another one of those undeveloped stories that has to have something to it. But they are going off, and they're watching they're the space horses, which I found out I couldn't remember the name, but they're called fathiers, like fathiers. And they're basically watching these horse races, and they know that Rose is basically harkening back to her childhood days of saying, this is what happened. People came in, they destroyed everything, they took everything, and they didn't care who they messed with, whose lives they destroyed. And you see that these kids are there's basically children who are slaves, which harkens back to Anakin and all these other stories that we've seen before of children not being children being used as resources. And this is where we see BB-8 who runs in and says, I found, basically beeps that he's found the guy, and they run to go find him. So it's kind of like they take this storyline of those who are affected and puts it on hold.
Right.
And they go, and as they're going to see the guy, we see him. We see the guy who is supposedly this master code breaker. We see two ladies next to him, one of which who seems to have a little bit of importance. But then immediately the Finn and Rose are taken away for the funniest of things, parking their ship on the beach where they're not supposed to. They are not known to be rebel supporters, rebels, anything like that. They just parked their ship in the wrong place.
Right.
So they get arrested. They get taken to jail. We don't see this guy who's supposedly supposed to be the one who Maz says is the connection, who is the perfect person they're supposed to find. And there's no development of this. There's no answers.
Yeah.
It's just there.
Well, and the lady beside him that kind of looked and recognized Rose, the uniform that which she had on, but then it just stops right there. So you're like, well, are they going to come back? And then of course then you get the next character that appears.
Yeah, and I think that and we'll come back to this guy for a slight moment later. But we get Benicio del Toro, and I was very excited to see him in this. He's an awesome actor. Every time that he steps in, he does a really great job. Last time that I remember seeing him was in Guardians of the Galaxy as the Collector. And he's just got an air about him that anytime that he's going to be in a movie, he's not going to be the most important character, but you're going to remember him.
Yeah.
And he has this character, DJ, who is basically a pirate, a criminal, a smuggler, and he is somebody who really pushes this idea that there are no good guys and no bad guys. There's just
reminiscent
of the
Han Solo.
Yes, he's very
very early Han Solo. Not trusting of the world, sees the world for what it is.
And I think we'll get to this when the moment happens a little bit more. I don't think that we've seen the last of Del Toro either.
No,
he had too much of an impact of the characters and the storyline to just be gone.
Right.
So I think we'll get more of him, but he's the reason why they escape. He's the reason he gets them out of the jail cell. He saves them at the end of the chase that we'll talk about. He's a major player in this whole movie, but he's not who they set out to originally get.
Right.
Which I think is also important because as a result of that, things go south later on.
Right.
But they never really give us this guy, and I think we'll come back to him in a second. We do get this really cool chase scene with these fathiers through the city, and they basically just blow a bunch of shit up. They destroy this city by this herd of horses that are running through. They destroy the casino. They destroy the streets. I mean, everything is in ruins, and they finally escape. And Finn says, "All right, we may not escape, but it was worth it for doing all that." And she goes, "Well, not yet." And she lets the last one go, which kind of shows Rose as being this connected to the Earth.
Right.
She is more of she kind of, for me, resembled a little bit of Leia as this humanitarian.
Right.
Which we really haven't had a whole lot. Rey is not Leia. There's no character in this new reboot, or 7 and 8, that resembled being Leia. We have a Han. We have multiple Hans. We have a Luke and Rey. We have all these characters. We hadn't seen a Leia yet. And so Rose, for me, was kind of that first, she's rebellious, she's angry, but she's a humanitarian at heart.
Right.
So I thought that was really cool to see, especially for a character that didn't have a whole lot of development going into the movie. I didn't even know she was in the movie until we saw her. It was good for her.
Well, and for me, you see them going through the city and destroying things, which again becomes a common theme throughout the movie about every once in a while you just got to kind of go blow shit up.
Exactly.
You got to go blow shit, and it's on both sides of the ball. Everybody gets their moment in this movie to go blow something up, which I don't know if there's a certain irony to that, or if it's pandering to certain kinds of fans who, say, well, this particular movie didn't have enough of this action, or, whatever, that all of a sudden we're going to satisfy somebody's, appetite for let's just blow some shit up with the best equipment we can find and enjoy the moment.
We even see that, too, with Poe early on in the movie, where he's talking, or Leia's telling him, not always can you have the answer by running into battle and blowing something up. And he even says, all right, is it time to go run into battle and blow something up? And she's like, yep. And so there's a time for it. And not just within the movie, but within, their lives. It's sometimes you can't have a plan. Sometimes you just have to say, all right, this is what's going to happen, and if it works, it works. And
the growth comes from in the characters, and they figure out when there's a time to blow shit up and when there's not a time to blow shit up.
Yeah.
Even, as we'll find out later, even Kylo has to kind of learn this. That there's certain times where you do bang, 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 but then there's other times where you got to have a skill to what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's about it with Canto. Canto Bight. It's they escape. There is that one more thing I wanted to talk about. So they escape on a stolen ship, and this is where DJ is showing like, oh, let's see who owned this ship, and you see that the guy that is basically saving them by having this ship that they are escaping on, he was selling weapons to the
He's a war profiteer.
And all of the images there are. AT-ATs, and they are TIE fighters, and all these, and then all of a sudden X-Wing shows up.
Yeah.
And it's basically, all right, it's that same idea. There are no good guys and bad guys. There's only
It harkens back to, from a different set of movies, but you go look at Iron Man.
Absolutely.
When he becomes all of a sudden he realizes that he too, his company is a war profiteering.
Yeah.
They're making money off of both sides.
And my theory, and it's just a hunch. I don't know if there's really any backing to this, but I think that this ship that they stole may have been the guy they were supposed to find.
Exactly.
I'm thinking because there was nothing of him. He was in it for a couple seconds, and he was even a recognizable actor. I don't remember his name, but I was like, oh, he's in the movie. Okay, cool.
Right.
And then he's not in the movie. He's in there for 10 seconds.
Well, and he's that whole scene in the casino and everything else is the opposite of when Luke and Obi-Wan go walking into the cantina in Mos Eisley.
Exactly.
And he's like, Mos Eisley, you'll never meet a place with more villainy and scum.
Yeah.
We go to the opposite end of the spectrum in this movie, but there's still villainy and there's still scum.
Yeah, and everybody's presented in such a nice way. They're wearing the nicest clothes, and they're drinking fancy drinks, and nice music is playing.
And there's music playing and things like that. But in the end, Mos Eisley and this place, not much different.
No, they're the same. They're at the root, they are the same.
Yeah.
So they escape. They're heading back to try to now get onto Snoke's ship and disable the tracking device. This is where we then jump into the other side of things, where Poe is figured out that Holdo has really no plan. Her plan is to wait until the gas or their fuel runs out. And at that moment, they're going to fill up the rest of it with the rest of their fuel on the transports and just abandon ship.
Run away!
Yeah. And Poe doesn't like it. He says, we have no defenses or weapons on these transports. You basically are killing the rebellion if you abandon ship. She says, it's kind of this, it's above your pay grade thing. This is not your fight to have.
Yeah.
And Poe decides to mutiny.
Right.
And this is where we see a handful of people joining in with him, including Billy Lord, which I thought was really fun to see her again. But we have her, and we have basically we have one of his fellow fighter pilots, who I think that is who Joseph Gordon-Levitt voiced.
Right.
I find you see that he voiced somebody which basically was a bunch of grunts and groans.
Right.
Which we do actually, if you look up, you'll see all of these different people who will make their way into the movie as uncredited, but they were there, including in this one. We had Tom Hardy. We had Prince Harry and Prince William as stormtroopers. And there's the thought process that James Corden was in it as one of the people who got 2 seconds of getting blown up in an X-Wing.
Yeah.
And I think that's always cool. We had Jeremy Renner, who was one of the... Jeremy Renner was one of the stormtroopers in The Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you find some cool things like that.
Yep.
But the mutiny is basically short-lived. As soon as they get to the bridge, in order to go into hyperdrives, or not hyperdrive, sorry, the light speed, as soon as Finn and Rose are able to turn off the tracking device, Leia's awake.
Yeah.
And Leia puts an end to the mutiny. She stuns Poe and kind of ends the mutiny right then and there. He wakes up and he's on a transport, and this is where we start to see a little bit of change in the demeanor of Holdo.
Mm-hmm.
She's interacting with Leia and saying, I like him. He's what we need. In talking about Poe, and this is the moment we find out that there is more to the plan. That someone needs to stay on the ship to continue to distract the First Order from destroying the transports, and she is going to be that person who does it.
Right.
So her character ends being quite honorable, and
Yeah.
her character's
Heroic.
not done yet. We'll talk about it a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
but she does a lot more. But she gets to say, may the Force be with you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a passing of the torch, unfortunately, to someone who's not going to continue on from what we find out later on with her. But yeah, it's a cool moment that we see that there is a plan, and the rebellion is a lot stronger than what we think it is at that moment. So then we go to Snoke's ship, and 2 storylines are happening on Snoke's ship. One very short. Finn and DJ and BB-8 and Rose are on the ship. They do get in, and DJ gets them to... Del Toro's character gets them to the tracking device and is about to turn it off when they get ambushed by Phasma, stormtroopers, and all these others.
Which I thought was pretty badass that she showed up.
She's one that I'm really... I want to talk about her. So while we're on this, I don't think they ever achieved Phasma's potential. I think she is dead. I mean, from the battle with Finn, it seems that she is dead. Falls into fire and explosions, and it doesn't seem like she's getting out of that one.
Right.
But just felt like an afterthought. In this movie, felt like an afterthought.
Yeah.
Strengthened Finn's character a little bit, but it felt weak to me.
Well, and I thought it was just kind of. I mean, honestly, the way they got rid of her in the first one, they did. They kind of bring her back like, oh, well, we'll bring her back for a guest spot, make it show that she's a warrior, and then we'll go ahead and just, blow her up again.
Yeah, and she didn't take off her helmet at all in this one. We saw her eye at, at one moment, but she didn't take off her helmet, which I think was good in a sense because it showed her as like the warrior that you said, but it showed her as part of the machine. She was not a separate character and not with motives. She was just part of the First Order. But I mean, Finn makes short work of her. She does initially win the fight by knocking him off the ledge, but he's not gone, and he comes back and.
There's something to that too. I mean, there may not be anything to it, but in my mind, there's something about Finn that's different, and his connection with Rey, first of all.
Yeah.
They've been through a lot together, and obviously you grow closer to people when you're under duress and things like that. But it seems like every time he gets into something, he learns from it, and he gets better. Yeah,
he is so much stronger as a character than he was the first time we saw him.
Yeah. I mean, and but you also get the sense when him and I can't think of her name now. I just had it in my head. Played by Tran.
Rose?
Rose.
Yeah.
So when him and Rose meet up, they both figure out what it is they need to find or how the tracking device works. They're having a conversation like scientists, literally.
Oh, yeah.
So it shows you that he's got a weird, varied background. the fact that he knows where where the trash can is on a ship, or where the escape pods are. I mean, the guy's learning things as he goes. So he's obviously a pretty smart dude.
Yeah. And I originally thought he was our Han Solo mirror, that kind of character. But I think that's becoming, like we said, more and more like Poe.
Yeah.
Poe is that guy who's going in and he's guns blazing and he's learning every now and then. And but the reason why I thought is because of the connection that Han and Finn had at the end of Force Awakens.
Right.
They had those moments, but he definitely Finn takes a step away from that persona in this one. He's, like you said, he has a little bit of knowledge of everything, and he continues to learn. I don't think he is a mirror of any character. I think that they're making Finn his own entity.
I think they're making him his own entity, but I think they put in, like with DJ, I think that they actually put some elements of Han Solo in him as a person who's just kind of like wherever that was what Han Solo was originally, was just wherever the biggest buck was, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And that's where this guy was, and that's how he comes out. Only this time, it's on the bad side.
Yeah.
It's on the bad side. He's taking money from the bad side. So.
Yeah, and so, yeah, you're referring there to DJ kind of turning in everybody.
Yep.
And this is where I said it's important to know that they didn't get their guy. They got another guy, and this other guy screws him over. He gives away the whole idea that they're trying to trick you by distracting you from the transports, and so that's when the transports start going down. He also turns in, Finn and Rose, which then puts them in danger.
Right.
And they even said, like, Finn says to DJ, he's like, you're helping the wrong people.
Right.
Like, you're going to pay for this. And he's like, maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Which I think is why we haven't seen the end of him.
Exactly.
I think he escapes before the ship goes, gets torn up.
Gets haywire.
And I think that we will see a harken back to this. And Finn he went through Phasma, but I think him defeating Phasma was one element. Now he's going to go on to DJ.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be that.
There's going to be something there where I don't know if it's going to be a fight between them or it's a case of, what is it that they could give DJ that's going to bring him to their end of things? Because the guy's obviously pretty smart, but he's shisty.
He's Solo. Like he has a redeemable quality about him, but he makes a very poor decision. He's Han in Empire,
right.
Leaving.
Yeah.
Or not in Empire, in Return of the Jedi, leaving and saying, I'm done, and they're like, all right, well,
I've got a bounty on my head. I got to get over to this, that, and the other. It's one of those things where there's just some similarities there. Whether there's anything to that, it doesn't make any difference. I just see some of the common themes of that.
Yeah. Okay, so the other side of it is Rey, and Rey goes onto Snoke's ship, leaving Luke, saying that she is going to see what she can do with Kylo. Kylo's going to be the hope. If you're not going to be that hope of the rebellion, then maybe Kylo will be. And immediately she gets taken into custody. Kylo's taking her down to see Snoke into his chambers, and we have an interesting little quiet discussion on the elevator where she's trying to tell him, you don't have to do this.
Right.
And he continues to talk about, I know you felt it too in this connection, where she's like, I saw your future, and you're going to turn to the good. Like,
right.
It's solid. You have a positive outlook. And he goes, oh, that's funny, because I saw your future too, and you turned to my side.
Right.
So there's this ambiguity that really, it sorts itself out a bit, but there's still some questions at the end. And it's one of those moments that we don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
And I think that discussion on that elevator before they see Snoke really, it throws the audience off. It makes you wonder, one of them's got to be right, right?
It goes back to the Return of the Jedi, where Luke is on the elevator with Darth Vader, having this very same conversation.
Yeah,
but the difference between those two conversations is that you have two young kids who really don't know what the hell they're thinking.
Neither of them have a place.
And you have Luke and his father, who Darth Vader we all know was a complete badass.
Yeah,
and he's just like, dude, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah,
and I think that was kind of an interesting, parallel there.
So we get down to Snoke, and he reveals that he's the one that is the connection. He was mind melding. He's making this connection between Rey and Kylo, which at least for that moment makes you believe, all right, well, maybe they have no relation. They were both pawns in Snoke's game, and both of them fell victim to it.
Right.
At that point, though, we start to see a little bit of Snoke's power. There are a couple moments where Rey tries to jump out, and she takes her lightsaber, and she's gonna go after him, and he takes it and like flips it around her, and like takes it back and puts it next to him. Right. He picks her up, and he's not even moving. Like usually when you see the Force used, they have their hand flickering.
Right.
He's just sitting there.
Yeah.
And the power that he portrays in that short moment, showing her the transports being destroyed, and kind of that idea with Return of the Jedi where Luke sees all of his friends dying, and that was another cool little mirror, very subtle, but it was there. But then we have Kylo being told, you have to kill Rey.
Right.
And I don't think a single person in the audience thought he was going to kill her, but I don't think a single person in the audience actually thought that what was about to happen would happen.
Absolutely not.
The build up to Snoke and all of the questions and all of the
who he was,
who is he, and what's his place in all this, and what's he going to do, it meant nothing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anybody who was sitting there for years on end now trying to figure out who this guy was had everything blown up in 10 seconds.
And I at the same time wonder, how did Snoke not realize that Kylo was about to kill him? And how did, maybe Kylo's power is just so immense that he was able to disguise this, because Snoke's the type of person, the type of I mean, I don't want to call him Sith or Jedi, but whatever he is, he's more powerful than this.
Remember what Luke said. He goes, "I've only seen this kind of power once before." And he goes, it didn't scare me then. It didn't scare me then, but it scares me now. Well, now you're seeing, the new Force.
Yeah.
You're seeing the new Force, and I think that Snoke represents the old Force. I think Luke represents the old, the old Jedi. The old good guys. You're starting to see a changing of the guard subtly.
Yeah.
And in this case where they take out Snoke, and eventually what happens at the end of the movie, you see a new generation begin to take place.
Yeah, and I mean, so we're talking about killing Snoke, and Kylo twists the lightsaber toward him and makes it look like he's about to kill Rey, and what Snoke is saying is, fulfill your destiny, do what you have to do, kill your enemy, and he does. He kills Snoke, who at that moment first off,
that's where his Force probably was so focused on the fact that he felt like he had control of Kylo that he completely didn't realize was
unaware of what was going on. But at this point, everybody's mad because now we're like, all right, well, Snoke's dead. We're never going to learn about him now. But at the same time, this is where we all know now, okay, well, Kylo's going to turn to the good. He's doing this. Well, that's short-lived, but it's this idea that...
Well, how about that badass laser fight?
The duo, the fight with those two was amazing.
Oh, unbelievable.
I'm sad to see that Kylo's still kind of our villain, because both Kylo and Rey fighting together and using each other in so many different ways, just as a pair, was amazing. It was phenomenal.
The final kill itself was just incredible.
Oh yeah.
The fact that everything was just so quick and things like that, but it was. I think that even Luke saw it when Rey was, back on the island and starting to use her lightsaber and things like that, and he was just like, damn.
Well, and I think you mentioned the new Force. That fight was the new fight. That was what you do with lightsabers with the new Force, not with the old Force. It's not like the gentlemanly duel that we saw between
the old Eppies and
with Obi-Wan and Vader, which is probably one of the more well-known lightsaber battles, but one of the most boring.
Well,
they don't
most
do anything.
Underwhelming battles.
Yeah.
It was like two old men going at it.
They slap their lightsabers together a couple times and then they're done.
Yeah.
Like he kills him. So it's this idea that this is what the Force is going to allow you to do. And some of the interactions, some of the teamwork that they used was just really, really cool.
Yeah, well played.
Yeah. But now we see, though, that Kylo his plea to Rey is one that I'm really excited to see how it develops, because you see him talk about let the past die.
Right.
And this means you have to let the Jedi die.
Right.
You have to let the First Order die.
Right.
He's like, we cannot continue to pick a side, because as soon as we pick a side, this war will never end. And for me, that is the largest truth is that if you have a good guy and a bad guy and a good and bad side, you are never going to have unity. So Kylo's talking about this idea that you can't have this good or bad, and I'm really intrigued to see how that plays out because Rey decides not to join him. She's like, "Don't do this. Don't go back to the dark side." I almost for a moment sided with Kylo, saying, "No, I don't think he's going back to anything. He's just trying to be done with this." He's like, "You got to let Luke die. You got to let Leia. You got to let this die." Which is interesting because it's that callback to the new Force and the old Force. The old Force is always going to be Empire versus Rebels, or it's going to always be that. It's like if we continue to do this, it's this, it's a never-ending war. It will never end.
If you go back to the days of Yoda explaining the differences between the two, the dark side is always easier. There's more lucrative. It's much like how we see the younger generation today, very, very in the now. What power can I get now? What do I get out of this now? Mm-hmm. And I think you also see in Kylo's eyes, when they're finishing that battle, all of a sudden you see that change. Yeah. Obviously, the dark side of the Force is still drilling into him, thinking this is what needs to be done. A, B, and C. This needs to be done, but then when we get to the final part of this movie, then you kind of see the new Force in a way that we didn't expect.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see this interaction between these two. Mm-hmm. But one last thing we find out before this shift happens is Kylo is telling Rey, you know who you are. Mm-hmm. You know what this is. Say it. Mm-hmm. And everybody at that point is expecting.
Yeah, we're all on the edge of our seats.
We're like, oh, it's Leia. Like they're brother and sister. They're brother and sister. And she's like, I'm nobody. Mm-hmm. And it's something that we talked about last night. I looked up more to see okay, what is going on. It's this idea that Rey is much like Luke.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense. That she doesn't. This is not her story. She doesn't belong here.
Right.
But even less so because she has no connections whatsoever to any of these characters. At least from what Kylo says, her parents were traders, smugglers, pirates. They traded her in for beer money, basically, and they were horrible people. And she doesn't belong in here. He's like, this isn't your story. You don't belong here. He's like, you don't matter to this. You don't matter to anybody, but you matter to me.
Right.
So it's like, okay, so. There you go. She's going to shift, and she doesn't. Right. She doesn't do it. She actually goes to grab her lightsaber and try to kill him, saying like, okay, like he is not able to turn back.
Right.
But another one of the major questions, I think the two biggest questions in going into this movie was who is Snoke and who are Rey's parents.
Right.
And they both sucked.
Yeah,
like
you didn't
get
those
answers.
Balloons. Those were two balloons that were just sitting there waiting for him, and they both got popped.
Yeah, and they
got popped.
I'm not disappointed in either, but I think that it's a very strong word of warning for all of us going into Episode 9. Stop trying to answer questions because they're not going to be answered the way that we want them to.
No.
Now, I did look up, like I said, a little bit, and the director said, Rian Johnson said that it is. That is how he interpreted it. Now, when Abrams takes back over in Episode 9, we may find out that Kylo was messing with her. Yeah. We may find out that what he saw and what he made her see was what he thought was the truth, but wasn't at all.
Right.
So until the final credits of Episode 9 roll without knowing this, I'm not necessarily sold that her parents are not anybody.
Right.
But for the time being, that's the truth that we have, and that's what we have to go off of. So, a little disappointing that there isn't a major connection, but also it adds another level to the story that will be fleshed out a bit more in Episode 9.
Well,
so
and I think
I'm excited for that.
Yeah, and I think that their relationship with the Force, both of them, is so different.
Yeah.
They have a different relationship with it. I mean, she was. I mean, for a moment there, like I said, I think all three of them. At some point or another in their lives or in this movie, especially with two of them, is that they did take a peek at each side. Mm-hmm. They did take a peek at each side, and they didn't get the answers that they wanted. They see it for something. They're looking at the Force as something for answers.
Yeah.
Are they getting those answers? Well, no.
Well, the ambiguity of this is really what I think is going to be interesting going into the ninth one, because we do have a little bit more to talk about with Crate and this final battle. But there's really a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions revolving around where's Rey's place, where's Kylo's place. We feel by the end that they are pretty solidified on opposite ends. But the way in which both of them approach it is so different that it may be a little bit more in that gray area than, good and bad. So, but they go to Force, basically have this battle of Force for the lightsaber, and that's where everything goes to shit for everybody. Right. We'll jump back to the Rebellion side of the story. So Holdo, there was a little bit more to her plan that we didn't talk about at that moment earlier in our discussion, but they have gotten to this old rebel base. They've been pushing to the point where that was her plan. She's like, all right, we're going to get to the base, and then we're going to start over. We're going to try to fortify this base and put up a last stand. If anything, it's safer than this ship. Right. But she notices that the Rebellion these transports are being picked off. The plan has been outed by DJ, and the First Order is stopped attacking this ship, and they are attacking the transports. And she says, all right, she turns the ship around, and
which is one of the most badass moves.
This is so cool. This is so cool. She turns the ship around, puts it into light speed, or before she starts activating her light speed, and they're saying, oh, it's jumping. Should we follow it? And they're like, no, it's empty. They're just trying to distract us. But after she starts activating it, she turns the ship, facing it straight at Snoke's ship, and punches the light speed. And at this moment, this is one of those science realities that is we kind of suspend our belief of science in these movies so often that when something like this happens and you realize the sheer force of what would have happened, and it literally is like putting water and fire together and saying like it's just going to cut straight through it, and it did. The ship cuts through Snoke's, and it's in a flash of light, and that then the debris from that destroys pretty much everything else. And I don't know how they actually even had any of the ship together long enough for anything else to happen. Right. But everybody quickly abandons Snoke's ship, within minutes because of what's going to happen to it. I mean, it's cut in half. Right. It was so cool. Visually, it was neat. Yeah. But then the silence, and this is one of those moments where we talked about in the theater. We were in a theater of almost 400 seats, packed to the brim. We only saw a handful of empty seats, and when there were moments of silence in the movie, there was silence in the theater. Yeah. It was really cool to see everybody hooked in. Right. And this is one that was just further impacted by the silence, because there is not a single sound coming from the screen after this light speed gets hit, and you hear the absolute silence, and then you hear the absolute chaos that results from it right after the boom of sound, which is really, really cool. All right, so now we can jump back into what's going on the ship. Rey then escapes from this in the chaos of the ship being cut in half. She escapes, and we find her later on back with Chewie, and Finn and Rose and BB-8 are able to escape. We talked a little bit about this. This is where the battle happens with Phasma, which we already talked about. But then they're also able to escape because of the chaos and everybody kind of trying to save face. So now we jump over to the last chapter of the story, which is the final battle on Crate, this former rebel base. So before we get to that, though, we talked about it a little bit, and I don't remember where it happened in the movie, but I know it happened before this. So let's talk about Yoda and Luke. Luke decides at this moment he needs to destroy the Jedi. Right. He's back on Ahch-To, and he's like, this just can't happen anymore. We can't continue to try to be this religion that doesn't help anybody. And he has come to the conclusion that he needs to destroy the text. He needs to destroy this sacred tree, and he's done. And Yoda shows up, which I thought was amazing to see. I did not expect him to show up. I should have, just because they always harken back to these old masters. But he shows up, and this is where we have our discussion of what's important and where do the Jedi's place actually rest in this whole storyline. Right. What were your thoughts on this discussion? Because it's just so complex. We'll just kind of talk about it as a whole.
Well, I think it's pretty funny that he comes in and he's like, oh, well, you've read the text, and he basically tells him it's not exactly the most enlightening reading.
Yeah. They're not. I think his quote is like, they're not quite page turners, are they?
Yeah, they're not quite page turners, are they? And it's one of those things where he again is giving the lesson of where is your head and what is important. Yeah. What is important, and then when it comes down to when he really wants to light the tree on fire, again. It's like the old failure back in the swamp, which I thought was ironic that they do show his X-wing in the water.
That was cool.
At the beginning of the movie, that his X-wing is still there, and I think that's also part of the lesson is that maybe he, it makes you think, did he really stay on the island because he couldn't, because he was, was disciplined as a Jedi, or was it he couldn't get his ass down there to get his X-wing out of the water? I mean, I actually had that thought, But then when Yoda comes in and steps in and says, well, here, let me just do it for you. This is real easy. I don't need a torch. I've got the Force.
And the lightning that strikes it. And he's like,
which
oops.
speaks, again, to the power of Yoda.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really cool. I mean, he sits there, and they're sitting in front of this burning tree, and that's the last we see of Yoda. But Yoda steps in, and he just kind of, he continues where he left off in Empire. It's this idea that he's still teaching Luke, and Luke is not the master, and he says that I'm just this legend, and I should not be seen as this. And he's like, I'm trying to do right, and I'm trying to help, and all I continue to do is cause pain and anger and anguish by failing people and failing Leia and Han and Ben and all of these people. And Yoda just kind of says, you need to relax. Yeah. You need to stop thinking so much.
Chill out, dude.
And then the next thing we see Luke showing up down on Crate. That's the next time we see him. Before that, though, we find out that, all right, so this is this huge fortified door, and nothing is going to break through it. Yeah. And then they say, oh, okay, well, these new AT-ATs and this kind of barrage cannon or whatever they called it, it's going to crack this door like an eggshell. Right. And they're like, all right, well, I guess we're screwed. We got to go do something about it. Damn. So they go out and they try to do something about it. They get these old speedsters to try to take this gun down, which for me I thought was kind of almost like crappy pod racers. Right. And hell, I'll be honest, I thought they were going to have pod races when they had the horse racing. Oh, they're like, wait, that's not, is it? And I was like, oh my god, pod racing's back, and it wasn't back. No, it was right. But yeah, so we had these speedsters, and they are getting picked off left and right. They are these just junky ships. Yeah. And I don't even know if they had guns. I don't know what they intended to do with them.
They had something, but they were going to try and shoot down the middle of the big gun, was the whole idea. But they talked about how rusty everything was, and of course then you find out that the plan is nothing but salt. Yeah. And things like that. So, I mean, obviously it was an old salt mine, so that means a lot of that equipment was probably falling apart anyway. Yeah.
Rusting
and all that kind of stuff. But, they try to put up one last fight for whatever reason, to try and get it and trying to stall again. And then, of course, then they find out, nobody's coming.
Yeah, and they send out, and no one is responding to this, the rebellion's signal. And I think that's where we're going to have a lot of our story reside in the final episode. Is what is next for everybody? Right. Maybe that's where we get Maz and all those stories. But no one at that time is coming except for Luke. Luke shows up. Well, and
Chewbacca
and Chewie and Rey show up. In the Falcon.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of the movie, is because it was very reminiscent, and that's where I think that the parentage, is still going to be in question of Rey. Yeah, and how this is going to play out, because again, here comes the Millennium Falcon to the rescue again. Yep. And why does this keep happening? And then why does it, what did he say about the ship?
Oh yeah, they're like, so the Millennium Falcon swoops in and gets all of the TIE fighters to follow it, and they're like, oh yeah, the Falcon, it's taking them all off, and Finn goes, man, they really hate that ship. Like,
yeah. I mean, and of course, it's a play on words as well, because he's doing something that they hate for them to doing, and it was just. Yeah, it was actually very good comic relief at a time when you're like trying to get into the action, and then all of a sudden, boom, here you are. Yeah,
well, and then you also see Rey on the gun, very much like Luke was.
Yes,
and that was one of the theories.
And again, messing with my head. Yeah, because I think it was at that point of the movie where like, this is really messing with my mind.
Yeah,
because there's so many parallels of, first of all, she's on the Millennium Falcon, but she's not driving. She's shooting like Luke used to shoot. So what in the hell's going on here?
Yeah,
so,
I'm like I said, I'm still not sold that she's got these horrible parents that just want beer money. I think that there is a connection, and maybe we'll be wrong, but there's still plenty.
We've already been wrong about a couple of things already. Yeah. So I'm not going to be surprised if I'm completely wrong about this. But
they've left plenty of doors open so that once they're writing this and filming this, that if they want to go a route, they can.
Right.
So the Millennium Falcon shows up, takes away the TIE fighters. So now the speedsters, the few that are left, have the ability to go and still try to take out this cannon. But Poe, in a huge character development moment, decides that no, we're not going to win this. We need to peel off. We need to go away, which is the exact opposite of what he did at the beginning of the movie.
Right.
And Finn says no, he's not going to let the Empire, the First Order, win, and he's basically giving himself up in a suicide mission, in kind of the suicide run of flying straight up the gun. And at the last second, Rose comes back in, crashes into his ship, and the gun shoots and destroys the door.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I was angry. I was like, so now you have killed the rebellion, and you might have killed yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't understand it. I do now. She loves him, which for me, I saw little hints of that. Their a relationship or emotions were developing.
Right.
But now, how much of that's going to play into the final movie? Because I think Rey cares for Finn.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if it was ever in that romantic way, although they teased it a lot throughout. I think Rose is going to be that romantic, and maybe we have this whole...
you kind of see her when she's looking at, him, Finn taking care of Rose on the bed, and you see her kind of glance over there, but then, it's kind of that case of where the reality of being a Jedi sets in, and here comes Leia. She sits down in front of her and takes her vision away for that moment.
Well, and that one to me mirrored the whole idea where you see Luke and Leia, where there's the kiss at the end of it Empire, or was that New Hope?
That's New.
No, that was Empire, because end of New Hope they weren't on a ship; they were down getting their medals.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of Empire, where Leia kisses Luke,
well, she did kiss him though when they crossing over in the Death
Star.
Oh
okay,
but nothing romantic.
But they're on there, and Han looks over at Leia, thinking like, "Oh, so you're interested in Luke?"
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of Rey finding out that Finn's caring for Rose, and so there's maybe another element of fueling the fire that Han is a representation, or sorry, Rey's representation of Han. So. I don't know. There's a lot of questions there, and I think they do a lot of that at the end to make us question a lot.
Right.
But so we have this idea of this gun. It is blown through the door. The rebellion looks like they're about to crumble, but Luke shows up, and Luke walks out the door, and it's Luke versus an army, essentially. About 12 AT-ATs, the newer ones with a lot more punch. With this cannon and what's remaining of the First Order off of Snoke's ship.
Right.
And this is where another little element of humor pops in. At this point, Kylo has named himself the new Supreme Ruler. He's kind of solidified himself as the villain.
He tried to choke out Hux.
Yeah.
And then, Hux is like realizing that, well, okay, I guess I'm your patsy, dude.
Yep. He is going to be this.
And I've actually taken kind of some joy in that.
Oh, I like Hux a lot more.
I think that Snoke makes a comment about him early in the movie is that, basically he's not the smartest tool in the shed, but, it's that kind of crazy that will get you, results later.
Exactly.
The recklessness of the dark side of the Force, well, they kind of like that whole idea, and he's kind of that, that character that Leia's trying to keep Poe from becoming.
Exactly.
But he obviously acquiesces to Kylo and becomes his second-hand man again, and...
Yep.
And stuff like that. But then to see Luke come out, I think that was the badass moment everybody was looking for.
Exactly.
No matter what happened from that point forward, just to see him walk out into battle in front of, insurmountable odds once again was just cool. Before everything goes to hell at that point, it was just cool as hell to watch him walk out there. It was like, watching Yoda walk out anywhere, or in the prequels,
Yeah.
when he comes out and he's like,
we're all excited just because it's nostalgia and it's that wow factor you hope for. Before and I want to talk about this before we get to Luke's kind of moment. He's talking with Leia before he walks out, and he says, no one's ever gone. They're talking about Han here, but for me, like, that is one of those moments that you can't write when reality and entertainment mix in such a weird way,
right?
Where he's saying goodbye to Leia because he knows that he's probably not going to make it out of this fight,
right?
But in reality, it's Mark Hamill saying goodbye to Carrie Fisher,
right?
And like, if there was a moment where I felt like I was going to get choked up, it was there, because he says, no one's ever really gone.
Right.
Talking about the Force,
right?
And this idea that even when we leave, we are still with you,
right?
And he's saying that to Carrie, they're saying that to Leia, but then also us kind of looking at it like, well, Carrie Fisher's gone now, but this is kind of Mark Hamill consoling us, saying no one's ever really gone,
right?
Which was one of those like really cool moments that I wanted to kind of at least mention before we go into this fight, because there was all these moments where you're like, okay, well, how are they going to do homage? How are they going to do honor to Leia and Carrie Fisher? And I don't think they realized it when they filmed it, but I think that moment was that moment for him. So Luke's back. Like, so after this, he goes out. He walks out the front door, and he's staring down all these AT-ATs. And Kylo says, "Fire every gun we have on him." And it's one of those beating a dead horse moments where the first gunshot, the first blast, should have done him in.
Right.
And then for a good 25 seconds after it, you just see gun blast after gun blast, cannon fire after cannon fire on the same spot. And Hux goes, "I think you got him. Like, I think we're okay."
Great piece of humor right then and there.
And then Luke walks out. And we're like, okay, what the hell happens here? We find out why later, but I was just like, okay, this is him showing off his power.
Yeah,
this is the
this
power
was him
moment.
coming to the realization that he is still a pretty powerful guy, and then of course, the brushing of the collar, and like, oh yeah, that wasn't that big a deal. What's next, son?
So Kylo goes down to confront him one-on-one, because he's like, all right, well, if guns aren't going to do it, I have to. And so he goes down, and this interaction between the two of them is pretty interesting. It's the changing of the guard. It is old Force versus new Force, and it's this story of Ben Solo and Luke really coming to an end, and we don't know who's gonna win.
Right.
Turns out neither really win specifically, but I think Luke gets the upper hand. Well, clearly gets the upper hand in this. Right. Talking to him, saying, Kylo says that the rebellion is over, the war is over, and when I kill you, the Jedi will be over.
Yeah.
And then Luke has his line that mirrors what he said earlier to Rey of nothing in that statement is true.
Right.
And he says the rebellion is still alive. The war has just begun. And when I am gone, I will not be the last Jedi.
Right.
And so we're like, all right, so Rey is Jedi, at least in that sense. And also, hell, even Leia's still around, and she has elements of that as well.
Right.
And so then you finally you see Kylo go and run the blade through Luke, and he turns around. I was expecting a little bit of Snoke for a moment there. I'm like, oh yeah, he kills him, but he needs to kill him because that's what he says. That's what Obi-Wan says to Vader.
Right.
And you kill me in anger, and I'll be stronger than ever, and I'll never leave you. And I expected half of Luke Skywalker to fall to the ground for a second there. But we don't get that. We get Force projection.
Right.
And Luke's been just screwing with Kylo this whole time.
Right. And I mean, and I think what's so fun about it is that when he runs through him the first time and he turns around and he's there, and it's just like, and then he just kind of comes to a realization and he just kind of pokes him with his lightsaber.
Like a poker with a stick.
It's like poking with a stick. Are you still, and then you realize what's happened, and then he makes a comment about Han Solo, what he was, the anger that he has is much like his father's, and then, then his final line was really the point of it. I think was really cool is just, see you around, kid.
Yeah.
Which is, which we've heard many, many moons ago.
Yep.
So.
No, and it was really neat. And, after this we find, so he's been force projecting this whole time. And then after this, he dissipates. He kind of becomes
goes
one
the
with
way
the
of
Force.
Yoda.
Yeah, he just, and it's interesting because he doesn't die, but he's gone. You know, it's this idea that he's no longer here, but he's not gone.
That's
gone.
the one thing that I will take away from this movie is that I am not convinced he is gone.
No, we're going to get some of Luke in some way. You know, much like once Yoda died in Empire. Well, no, he didn't die in Empire. In Return of the Jedi, when he goes back to see him to complete his training, we're like, oh no, Yoda's dead. Well, no, Yoda's not dead. Yoda comes back at the end of that as his, the Force spirit, always there, and then he comes back here in Last Jedi.
This is, I mean, I'm convinced that there are two things actually out of this whole thing with the Force. One, I don't think that we've seen the last of Luke, and honestly, I don't think we've seen the last of Snoke either, because we really don't have a backstory of how this guy got to the Force and what he is. And if he was able to force himself back into a situation where he's leading, the dark side, who's to say that Luke isn't? He's already powerful enough to take himself out of it at a fairly young age compared to everybody else. If he's able to take himself out of the system for a moment, but then can he step back in? Yeah. In a physical form?
I wouldn't be surprised.
So I mean that begs a lot of questions.
Yeah, and there was that one last image before he disappeared, where it's him sitting on that rock and the two setting suns. Yeah. And I was like, if this is the last, which I agree with you completely, I don't think it is, but if this was the last images of Luke that we see, it is perfect because it mirrors the first images when he was standing on Tatooine with the two suns, which I thought that was really cool. Yeah. But him doing this Force projection was all a way of getting the rebellion safe. Right. It was the beginning of the movie where Poe is trying to save them by distracting. Luke was distracting them. Right. Which the rebellion does escape with help from Rey using her Force to lift rocks. Moving rocks. Which I thought was like, all right.
That was a great line.
And it's, moving rocks. There's so much continuity and mirroring and calling back to both within the movie itself, but as well as in the entire franchise. Right. This movie did a great job of paying homage and doing justice to old stories, but incorporating them in a new way. Right. So they escape on the Millennium Falcon, which up to this point, really, the Millennium Falcon is all that's left of the rebellion. Right. Those that remain, you have Rey, you have Rey and you have Finn and Poe and Leia, who are still there as the rebellion and all of their lackeys that are still around. Right. But that's it. We don't know. The fleets are gone. Everything's gone, and so we're going to have to find something to solidify us in this final fight.
And honestly, I think that you'll see a return to what you saw at New Hope. Yeah. The dirtiness, the grittiness. You're fighting with whatever pieces you have. I mean, that was kind of the cool thing about this final battle. With the cannon and everything else, is you saw a bunch of old machines. And that was the dirtiness I remember from the original. Yeah.
So Leia assures, though, she, and like you had said, she steps in on the ship in front of Rey as she's looking on Finn and Rose, and she says, we have everything we need. The rebellion is still good. The rebellion is still strong, and kind of saying basically, as long as Rey is alive, there is hope. Which still, to me, is like, okay, she's not just a random person. Right. But the movie ends with probably the biggest cliffhanger, and this is what I think the questions going into the third movie are going to be, is what is going on with these kids on Canto? At least this one specific kid. You see the story of Luke Skywalker being told by one of the kids to two others on Canto, and one of the slave drivers walks in and stops it. It's like basically tell him, get back to work, stop playing. Right. And this kid walks out, and he's going to sweep, and he puts his hand out and force pulls, grabs this broom using the Force.
It was maybe 4 inches of movement, but then it was, and I think that was just kind of a tease to you.
And if you would have blinked or looked down to grab something off the floor or something, you would have missed it. Yeah. But that one moment is
because you and I both sat straight up.
I was like, oh, what?
What? Yeah.
In this, it's not. That's not supposed to happen. Right. Like, that is not part of the plan. Right. And this kid comes up, and not only does he look up at the sky, and we see that blue streak, which is supposedly the light, the Millennium Falcon jumping, or some sort of hope jumping,
or the blue the blue laser sword of
yeah,
Luke or whatever. I mean,
and then he grabs his broom,
yeah,
and he holds it like a lightsaber.
Yeah,
he holds it like a weapon and he holds it up as opposed to holding it like a broom from the top down. I don't know if this particular kid is going to have any impact going forward, but I think his presence shows us that not only are the Jedi not dead,
but the Force is alive and well.
But and that's where we're going to see something with the ninth movie and what that's going to be doing. There's too much there in that it should just be like a little teaser of like, haha, look at this is happening. There's something there. There's in the story.
Yeah,
has to be.
Well, I mean, I think the Jedi Order will fall under Rey's tutelage of some sort.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, I did not see this, but I was reading this morning that the books actually exist on the Millennium Falcon. Did you see them?
I did.
Okay.
So when we had, and that's something too that. So we think when Yoda strikes the tree with the lightning that all the books of all the teachings are burned up. But when we are on the Falcon after the big fight toward the very end of the movie, you have Finn who grabs a blanket from this drawer to put it on Rose. Sorry,
Rose.
Puts it on Rose, and in that drawer are all of the texts, and they're there on the Millennium Falcon, which shows us Rey saved them. She grabbed them and. Not save them, stole them from Luke before she left. So, yes, she definitely is going to have something to do. She took them. She has something to do with them. She has a plan for them in some way.
And again, that's why I think that Luke at some point will make whether it's as an apparition or what, he's going to make an appearance once again.
Yeah.
And I think he'll be a major factor in the last installment.
So we got a lot of major questions going into the after the movie is over. What comes next? How is this franchise going to end? At least this trilogy. Like we said, what are going to happen with the Jedi? Kylo now seems to be locked in as our final villain. He seems to be who is going to be the last little bit of what is remaining of the First Order is going to be him. So I'm excited to think. What do you have? What are some of your answers? What do you expect coming up next?
Well, like I said, I think that there are two things there that I don't think we've seen the last of Snoke, and I don't think we've seen the last of Luke.
Yeah.
I think that the questions that I'll still always have is that how are they going to have Leia bow out?
Yeah. How are they going to write her out?
Which in this movie they showed that she actually does have some semblance of the Force. So are they going to have her go the way of Luke and Yoda and just kind of take a step out? Where she's done her thing. My guess is that they're going to see the rebellion return, and that she's going to be happy with it, and she's going to kind of go the way of Luke this movie.
Yeah.
They'll just have her step out, and that'll be a easy way to kind of see her go. But as you get to the end of this, I think that you've got a lot of. I think that when you look at this movie as a whole, the traditionalists obviously are not going to be very happy.
No, I agree.
They're not going to be very happy, but I mean. You can't expect, and especially this is what I always laughed about is people say, well, they should have done this and they should have done it. Look, it's their franchise, dude.
Exactly.
It's their franchise. They can do whatever the hell they want.
And you're going to pay to see it no matter what they do.
Yeah, and you can be happy. You can say, well, I'll never buy another one. I'll believe that when I see it. You'll still be interested and you'll still be wanting to know what's going on. And so I think that those were the two that I know for sure. I just feel like we're going to see. We haven't seen the last of those two, the good and the bad. Yeah,
and it's for me. I had so many. Like I went into this saying, "Oh, okay, so this is how it's going to work out. Rey's going to turn to the dark side by the end, and she's going to, and Leia's going to be killed." And I knew what was going to happen. I was like, "All right, this is what's going to happen." None of it came true.
No,
I was wrong on everything.
You think about it. You go back and look at their trailer. They really set a lot of people up.
They did.
They set a lot of people up.
And that's the thing too is you feel like sometimes the trailer has to show something to get you there, but that one.
Yeah, because there was a lot of long shots of Leia in the ships, that were about to get blown up, and you're thinking, okay, this is the moment where she gets hers.
Yeah.
And damn it, never happened.
And she's still around.
Yeah, she's still around. So, yeah, there's some work to do for the last installment.
So, okay, so we're going to do a little twist on this one. So I always ask, what's the character you wanted to see more of? But there's so many damn characters, and this is a 2.5-hour movie already. So what's a storyline that you wanted to see developed more that may not be developed in the last movie that you wish you would have had some more answers?
I'm curious about Maz.
Yeah.
I'm curious about Maz. I want to know who the hell she was fighting. Because it always seems like the battles were where the power is.
Yeah.
You never really in any movies, you hear about it, that they're taking over certain planets and things like that. But we've never had a movie, other than really Rogue One, where you see them without all the powerful people, that you're associated, like Darth Vader and
exactly.
In Rogue One, you get to see what it's like in some of those outlying planets where you just have who are considered. They're big in their planet area, but they're not big in the Star Wars story.
Yeah.
They're doing the work of the evil.
Yeah.
And they're keeping people down and things like that. So I'm kind of curious as to what Maz is up to, who she's doing battle with, and how that's going to play out, because I think there's some unfinished business with her, because she did make that comment of, that's a story for another time of how she comes into contact with the lightsaber. She obviously has some connections, and I want to know what those connections are. I don't know if it'll get answered, but it's something that I want to.
Yeah.
I want to kind of, I would love to have seen more of that.
I really that was one that as soon as she came in and then was gone and she jumped out, that reminded me a lot of in Attack of the Clones, where you have Obi-Wan who sends his message and then he's fighting the droids.
Right.
Where it's like, oh, if we didn't know what was going on, we would want to know what was going on with
right.
it. So that really, that made me think that there's something
that
there.
was kind of a real big teaser for me.
Oh, yeah. I just want to see, and it wasn't, the movie couldn't do it, but I want to know what the hell's going on with this kid at the end. Really, for me, that's the most intriguing storyline.
Because it could have easily been forgotten.
Yeah, and it
like you said,
you could have ended the movie with the Falcon and been okay.
Yeah. If you like you said, if you're like getting your purse and your wallet and everything else, and you're not paying attention to this kid walking out of the house and pulling that broom, less than 4 inches to his hand, you would have missed something. Yeah, and so I think you would have missed a major piece.
For me, that's the storyline I wanted more of, and I think it's not necessarily that the movie could have even given it to me, but I think that it did what it was supposed to do by ending it that way.
Right.
I'm intrigued. I want to know what's going on. Where does this one rank amongst the other 8 films to you, including Rogue One?
Well, I think that the first one again will always have my thing, because it was what started this whole thing.
Yeah.
New Hope is the whole crux of where all this starts. But when you look at the movies as a whole, you kind of get the stories, and some of the stories are going to change. Some of the stories are not going to meet your expectations or anybody else's expectations. But in terms of one, let's face it, this is about entertainment and escapism.
Yeah.
And as far as all those things are concerned, I think it ranks as probably the best one I've seen since New Hope. New Hope still to me is the ultimate of films.
Yeah.
Given that, even now you look at it and you think, oh, well, the effects. No, forget the effects. Talk about the story. The effects are just, whatever time period these movies are made.
Yeah, the storyline itself.
You have to kind of put that aside, But I think that it's still, New Hope will always be my favorite, no matter what.
I was expecting a little bit more mirror from this one, and I'm glad it didn't. It gave us its own storyline. Unseen plot points, things that we expected to happen didn't, and things that we didn't expect to happen did. The reason why I like Empire so much is simply because it ends with every potential cliffhanger possible.
Right.
And probably the biggest plot drop, spoiler of all time with this franchise of Vader being Luke's father.
Right.
That, to me, there's so much, and it shifts so much. And this one, it shifts a lot, but it doesn't have as many of the cliffhanger moments that Empire did.
Yeah, you'll have to admit, though, Snoke getting cut in half.
That one, to me, I did
not
not
expect. That is absolutely, I did not in a million years expect that.
No, that, to me, I expected Snoke to mirror the Emperor and be present in the rest of the films.
Yeah.
And hell, he still may show up.
But,
yeah,
exactly.
So for me, I agree. If it's not, it's up there. It's top 3 for me. Much better, in my opinion, than Force Awakens in just its overall accomplishment of what it wanted to get done.
Well, I think the storylines are a little bit tighter.
Yeah, and it didn't have to build up so much background like Force Awakens had to do. It had all these different characters and a new world, basically.
Right.
It jumped 30 years in the future, or 25 years, however long it had been. And so you had to establish that. You had less establishing that you needed to do in this one, and you could let things just organically happen.
Well, and I think that's the difference between the original trilogy and the trilogies of today, is that they spend a lot of time doing a lot of backtracking of who these people are, a lot of flashbacks and things like that. Whereas in the original trilogy, you didn't see that.
No, because you didn't need to.
You just did the story.
Yeah, you let the later episodes do that for you. If you really needed to know something else about Han Solo, you'd tell them later. You didn't need to know it now. You needed to know what they were doing now.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go final thoughts and ranking. On a scale of 1 to 5, I was thinking Porgs, but I don't know if I want to give them the limelight for the ranking. Let's go with this one. So on a scale of 1 to 5, lightsaber crystals. Because we saw a little bit of Anakin's lightsaber crystal at the end there. So let's go 1 to 5 lightsaber crystals and your final thoughts.
Well, I think it's still going to be a 5 for me, just for sheer enjoyment of the movie. I mean, one of your friends had said, the only thing I'll tell you before you guys go see this is that it's 2.5 hours of you sitting on the edge of your seat. By damned, I sat on the edge of my seat for 2.5 hours. And I really enjoyed it for that. I think it really gets your mind moving. I mean, my mind never stopped. I was telling you after the movie, dude, I'm sweating because I'm thinking so much right now, and I'm not sure where it all needs to go. And I mean, even when I went to sleep last night, my mind is in a jumble, trying to figure out what the hell just happened. And so, it's for me, it's still a 5.
Yeah.
But it's for the entertainment value. If I'm an old Star Wars person, I might take it down to a 4, 4.5. Only for the mere fact that you got messed with.
Yeah, they screwed with you.
You messed with some people here, and there's going to be some hot people about what's happened here and who's who and all that kind of good stuff. I think that but it was a lot of fun and enjoyed doing it, and I'm still laughing about the guy that didn't want to go into the movie last night and asking us for some spoilers, and we wouldn't give in.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. I gave it a 5 out of 5. For me, it may not be the absolute best Star Wars of them, but it is not far behind if it isn't the best.
It doesn't disappoint. Let's put it that way.
In no way, shape, or form does it. Unless you were dead set on some certain answers being given. The nice thing is, though, is this is still number 2. We are not done with this storyline, and the things that we knew to be true when seeing Empire for the first time were still shifted and messed with going into Jedi.
Right.
You did not know that Leia was Luke's sister at the end of Empire.
Right.
You did not know that Han was going to come back.
Right.
The things that you knew to be true at the end of that shifted.
Yeah.
So we still have plenty of time for those things to.
Well, and I don't think Rey has her answers, and I don't think that Kylo has his answers.
Yeah, absolutely. So 5 out of 5 crystals for me as well. I loved it. You guys are gonna, if you haven't yet seen it and you wanted to get, first off, if you haven't yet seen it and you got this far, I'm sorry because you don't need to see the movie now because that was probably the most spoiler-filled episode of the drive-in yet. But you can't talk about Star Wars and all this plot without getting to the nitty-gritty. So yeah, again, go see it and let us know what you thought. I am sure of all of the episodes that we've put out, this is going to be the one with the most differing of opinion, some contention. So give us your thoughts.
There'll be plenty of contention, I'm sure.
Yeah, so reach out on Twitter at Drive-In Eventide and let us know if you agree or disagree, what your thoughts are, what you expect to see out of the next couple. For specifically the new movie. Our next offshoot movie is the Solo movie, Han Solo's kind of background, and we were talking about that the other day, and haven't heard much about it, but that one's supposed to be coming out next year, and in 2 years we'll get our final conclusion to this trilogy. So just a couple of housekeeping things. Next week we will be coming back to Ohio to talk about The Greatest Showman, the musical, the new Hugh Jackman movie there. Going to be getting a new guest host next week, a friend of mine, Kelly, so I'm excited to have her on. She's a long-time listener, long time being a couple weeks. But she's been listening to the podcast, and we finally get to have her on it, and I'm excited for that. This episode is going to be coming to you guys a couple days before Christmas, so Merry Christmas to you guys, Happy Holidays to everybody. Enjoy your time with your family, have some safe travels if you are heading home and on your way back, wherever that may be. Again, I have to end this episode with a quick little shout out to somebody who is really following along with the drive-in, probably the largest fan. Andre, thanks for listening, man. I knew I told you I'd give you a shout out on one of these. So here it is. If you got 2 hours into this and you listened to the entire episode, you definitely deserve a shout out. And shout out to everybody else who made it through the 2 hour longest episode yet of the drive-in. Don't think we could have done it in less. Way too much.
Honestly, we probably could have gone on for another hour just because it's so. I mean, there's such a helter-skelter to the movie that you can't get it all.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. Thanks for coming on again, Dad. This was great.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was awesome.
For those of you who listened last week, you saw that, or you heard me say that I've seen every single Star Wars movie in theaters with my dad, and I couldn't let the streak break. So we'll have to figure out what we're going to do next year for the Han Solo movie, but I guarantee we will be seeing that one as well. So really excited to be able to do this. It was a lot of fun. But everybody, again, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Drive home safely, everybody, and have a great weekend ahead.